All right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from today. And welcome to the HRAI Quarterly Government Relations update for the benefit of members. My name is Martin Limas. I'm the Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations for HRAI. And joining me today will be several members of our Government Relations team. I'm going to start sharing my presentation if I can find it here. Hopefully this will work. Loretta, can you confirm whether you're seeing my notes or my...
I'm seeing your screen, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay, so how about now?
Seeing it with the notes.
Okay, so I have to switch this, I think, right? I just swap like this. Is that working?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, this is what we're going to try to cover in the hour that we have. I'm going to do a quick reminder for the benefit of members about what our relations priorities are for the year. I'm going to then dive a little bit deeper. That'll be a very kind of quick overview. I'll then dive a little bit deeper on progress on our climate leadership initiative, which you will have heard about at the last quarterly update and you might have read about in some of our newsletter stories, that sort of thing. We're going to also talk a little bit about some recent provincial wins in different parts of the country, mostly related to trades training initiatives, and hopefully we'll get through all the material quickly enough that we can have a little bit of time for a Q&A for members who are interested. Okay, so first, a quick overview of our priorities. Just so that you don't think that the climate statement is the only thing we've been working on federally, there's actually quite a number of initiatives we're plugged into, some of which are relatively new, some of which are long-standing items. But these are the 5 top priorities for in our government relations work at the federal level. One is the climate action work that I'll be talking about. Second is working on incentives for indoor air quality upgrades. We actually have a session at our annual meeting coming up next week that will be talking about how we can convince government to provide supports to improve indoor air quality, all in the wake of COVID and the higher level of understanding we now have about the importance of ventilation and other measures to improve IAQ. A really important initiative we've been working on for a number of years is gaining support from the federal government for workforce development. I'll be touching on that a little bit because it does connect to the first topic, but this is there's ongoing work happening on that. There's the work we're doing on the refrigerant transition and how to prepare the industry and the marketplace for what's coming. And finally, an ongoing priority for us and the work of Stephen Chartrand and others at HRAI is regulatory harmonization with the US and among provinces within Canada. That's our work at the federal level. And provincially, we're doing a lot of work to engage with various municipalities on their climate programs. That was the topic of one of our past quarterly updates. You might remember we are engaged with a number of municipalities across the country. You'll also be interested to know that we're having a special panel on this topic at the annual meeting as well in our discussion around climate policy. We've invited and we'll be happy to have representatives from Vancouver, City of Toronto, and Ottawa joining us on a panel discussion. We're also working at the provincial level, and this is something you will hear some reports on later this afternoon on aligning trades to meet the needs of industry. That's all provincial level work, and there's a lot of work to be done in that area. We're working in a number of provinces on regulatory burden reduction. We won't be talking about that today, but that's a big priority, especially in our largest membership province, which is Ontario. And as indicated previously, we're working pretty actively to improve interprovincial regulatory harmonization, and we are seeing a lot of progress in that area. So that's just to give you a flavor of the high-level priorities that we've been working on federally and provincially. Now I want to talk a little bit about our, excuse me, our climate leadership statement. I'm having difficulty moving through the slides here. Okay, here we go. Okay, and I just want to quickly remind you, we have talked about this before, but I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this. Why did we develop this leadership statement? Why was it important to do this public relations and GR work in Ottawa? And first, it's about raising awareness of our industry as having a positive role in relation to climate action, not people standing on the sidelines or people, in the background. Maybe we'll get to it. Maybe, if it suits us, we'll be part of this. We want to actually show governments that not only is industry interested, but in being part of this, but they actually want to lead the way. We believe that the statement will also appeal to Canadians for whom this is important. And we know from surveys that that's a growing percentage of Canadians who have concerns about climate impacts. We believe that taking positive leadership in this area will actually help to gain control of the industry's future and not be at the whim of government. That's very important for a lot of our members who don't want to just take policy as it comes. They'd rather be at the table and setting the agenda. And we know that taking a very positive statement of business wants to lead the way on climate action is a very strong message that has multi-partisan appeal. It's not just appealing to the current government. It should be of interest to all parties. So that's one of the reasons we've framed it that way. And we're aiming our messages at three audiences. First, industry members to build our own brand and to rally support behind the cause. Eventually, not so much as yet, but eventually we'll be directing some of this to Canadians to create awareness and attract interest in our industry and the products and services our members provide. And more immediately, and probably most importantly for the time being, is appealing to politicians among all parties and elected governments and bureaucrats, not just federally, but across the country, to compel them to engage with our industry. We know now that the work we've been doing is supported by our members. I won't report the entire results of our survey, but we did do a survey to gauge the level of member support for what we would be telling government. And you can see that the statements that are embodied in that climate action declaration are all very strongly agreed to or supported by members. It's a very small percentage who have concerns. So we feel like we're really on the right side of the membership on this, that we're acting on what our members want us to do. That's very important for us to be delivering this message in Ottawa and with the provinces. We want to be sure that we're speaking with one voice on behalf of members. So the communications plan, again, you may remember some of these elements. We've talked a little bit before about the plan. This plan has now been executed. We're midway through it, and we've done a lot of this work. We did some direct outreach to elected officials. That's all elected officials in Ottawa. We sent them postcards that on the one side, I'll show you a copy of it in a minute, talks about who HRAI is very succinctly, and on the other side includes a statement, the climate action statement that we prepared. We've had lots of meetings with relevant ministers, both at Environment Climate Change Canada and at NRCan, and a little bit at Employment and Social Development Canada, all of which have a direct interest in the issues we're raising. Not always with the minister directly, but more often with their staff, sometimes with the parliamentary secretary, sometimes with the bureaucratic teams that support them. On May 31st, we did a day on the Hill with a very small group of volunteers. And we gained a lot of traction, having quite a number of meetings with MPs and some ministerial staff. That was kind of the launch of our program. We did a news release that day, and the plan was to build a program over the 3 or 4 months since then to build to a second push, which will happen this month in Ottawa. The part of the plan was to have a reception on the second day of our annual meeting next week, Monday on the 19th, with MPs, where we will meet with as many MPs at one time as possible. You will see from the program at the annual meeting, we have lots of engagement with government. So we want to use the Ottawa annual meeting as a venue, as a focus for engagement with politicians and directly with our membership. So let me turn to the media outreach that we've done. On May 31st, we did a press conference and a news release. I'll show you some of that in a minute. We did some very targeted advertising through the Hill Times, which is a newspaper, an online and actual newspaper that goes to senior bureaucrats and all elected officials in Ottawa. It is widely read, more so than other newspapers that you might think might be popular, but in fact, the Hill Times is probably the go-to. So we did a full page ad in the Hill Times and also through their electronic platform. And then we did some social media campaigning as well, which we'll come back to in just a minute. So this is a shot of HRAI Chair Scott McDonald delivering the news release at the National Press Gallery the day we were in Ottawa. Here's a shot of some of our team meeting with MP Francesco Sorbara from Vaughan Woodbridge. Some of you might know him. This is a meeting with Ikwander Gahir, who is the MP for Mississauga Malton, actually the MP for where the HRAI office is located. And I just want to actually, before I proceed, I want to really call out and thank the small group of volunteers that we brought along with us to this to these events in Ottawa. You saw some of them in the picture, but specifically we had Rachel Hilling from Carrier Enterprise, Victor Hyman from the Climate Care Group, Jim Bolger from Waterloo Energy Products, Chris Hahn from Wolseley Canada, Sunny Parada from Panasonic Canada, and our chair Scott McDonald from JCI. That was the team, along with myself, who had a fair number of meetings with MPs and ministerial staff. So I want to thank them directly. They were awesome. They were very well spoken, very well engaged. I'm going to say a number of the meetings that we had, the MPs in question actually asked to have the meeting extended. A number of them asked for follow-ups, which we have done. So here's a copy of the postcard that was sent to all MPs in both official languages, prepared by Impact Public Affairs. That's I don't know if you can read it on your screen, but that's our actual climate statement, climate change statement, and then a little paragraph about who HRAI is. Same messaging. This is a copy of the ad in the Hill Times newspaper. And then we've followed up since that time with a bit of a social media campaign. And I'm going to ask Haifa from Impact Public Affairs to comment on that. So I'm going to have to stop sharing and let Haifa join. So let me just take a minute here. Okay, Haifa, you're ready to go?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm just pulling up my screen. All right, so I am with Impact Public Affairs. I'm the Digital Communications Coordinator, and working alongside HRAI, we developed some material for a social media campaign leading up to the upcoming annual general meeting and Hill Day. So we've developed some copy, so the captions for the social media posts, as well as some graphics to be shared on HRAI's Twitter. And this is, as I said, leading up to the upcoming general meeting and Hill Day. So we were recommended focusing the climate action advocacy on Twitter because our main target here is the government officials, and Twitter is the best way to reach them. So HRAI's team at Media Edge was tasked with posting these messages twice a week. So I'll just share a few of the graphics that we put together. And so all of these graphics embody the key messages that Martin spoke about, so that the HVAC industry is leading the way to a greener Canada, and that the industry is ready to meet the target of net zero emissions. So these are a few of the graphics. Got some more here. And these are all available on the Twitter right now. They're being posted. And at the end, I'll also include my email. If you want to share these graphics on your own social media platforms, feel free to reach out to me and I can send those to you. We have a few content that's already been published. So again, sticking to the key messages and sticking to what's been said in the climate action statement. And these are being posted on HRAI's Twitter account twice a week. So feel free to go ahead and share those onto your own accounts, which is the recommended next steps here. So I'll give it a second here so you can read what's been posted. And the next steps, we'd recommend that members share these posts on your own personal accounts just for maximum impact. We want as many people to see these as possible. And we will continue developing social media content to promote the climate action statement to government officials as well as the public. So let Martin get back to his screen. And then, oh, my email address, I'm sorry. And so for any questions, and if you want to download these graphics, feel free to contact me, hypha@impactcanada.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or to share those graphics with you or any copies if you want to publish those on your accounts as well. So thank you, Martin. You can go ahead and keep going with your presentation.
You're just on mute there, Martin.
My apologies. I wasn't able to unmute while showing my screen, so my system can't do two things at once, apparently. Thank you, Haifa. I'm just going to go back to my screen now. Hopefully this will work. Can Loretta or somebody confirm that this is working?
Nope.
No, what do you see?
I see your presentation screen. We need the
Okay.
okay.
Okay, working well now? Okay, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit now about how we're actually gaining traction, how we're, the results that we're seeing. I apologize. I was hoping that we might have some data on the impact of our social media outreach. We'll try to compile some statistics at the earliest possible to see how we're doing on that front, kind of responses and reader views we're getting at that level. But we are independently of that, I suspect we are making an impact because we are in active discussions with lots of people. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how we're gaining traction. First, through a very important avenue, we're addressing some of the industry concerns about greener homes. Greener homes in some ways was the catalyst for raising some of the issues that we, one of the reasons we felt we needed to take this leadership position, because greener homes, as many of our members have told us, seems to have been developed in isolation of of industry input. So we've told NRCan that a number of times, and we're now regularly in conversation with the leadership of the Greener Homes management team, and they are addressing concerns that we bring to their attention. So we do encourage members, if they have concerns about that program, you can always contact me. We've also formed a team that includes some of the people I mentioned before who are on that day in Ottawa team, but actually 6 or 7 others as well from across the country and from all 3 of our membership divisions. We've created what we're calling a Greener Homes HVAC working group that meets with NRCan staff fairly regularly to talk about how the program can be improved. Very frank and candid conversations, no one really pulling punches in those discussions. And the good news is that they're starting to actually address them. There are constraints on what NRCan can do about that program. There's very, very clear guidelines of what they are supposed to accomplish. But they are very open now to considering new measures to be included. They seem to have fixed a lot of the concerns about the product listings. We're talking to them about ways that they can recognize contractors, the importance of having qualified contractors involved in the program and that sort of thing. So a lot of good progress on that front. In August, late August, I was invited on behalf of the industry to participate in a ministerial roundtable with Minister of Natural Resources Canada, Jonathan Wilkinson, to discuss the federal Ottawa Green Buildings Strategy, which has been introduced. I'm going to come back to that in a minute and talk about what we're talking about and what HRAI's contribution will probably look like with support from members. We're engaged with a number of key government leaders, including the minister, as I mentioned, including Parliamentary Secretary Julie de Brussen, who will also be participating in a panel at our annual meeting next week. To a number of people in the NRCan leadership, that means like the senior bureaucrats, including the Assistant Deputy Minister, the Director General of the Office of Energy Efficiency. We met recently with the Natural Resources Committee Chair. So there's lots of engagement with politicians and senior government staff. I mentioned already, I've hinted a couple of times that we have a fair bit of involvement from government leaders at our annual meeting, and I'm just to manage a bit of your expectations on that. We had a really full program on Monday planned on the 19th next week, which may have been compromised just a little bit by the Prime Minister's declaration of a National Day of Mourning for the Queen. So that has meant that a number of the people we were hoping to include from NRCan may or may not be there. I think most of the program has been preserved and we're shifting some things around to the Tuesday, but we're really pleased to have the kind of buy-in and support from NRCan and other government agencies at our annual meeting. So that's a bit of an indication that that they're starting to listen to some of the concerns we've expressed. And without going into too much detail, we are pursuing a collaboration agreement with some key stakeholders under a wider platform. That's really just early days of discussions around that, but we recognize that HRAI and its members aren't the only stakeholders who have an interest in pursuing decarbonization and heat pumps and all the technologies that will help to reduce carbon and improve efficiency in homes and buildings. There are other stakeholders, utilities, other sectors, other industry sectors, environmental groups, and so on, even academic institutions who have an interest in this. And so we're looking to create a bit of a wider platform to deliver some of that key messaging to government. A little bit like our involvement with an organization you probably are all familiar with called Efficiency Canada, which has a primary focus on the benefits of energy efficiency. That's a collaborative group that we participate in, and as a lot of people, the way a lot of people put the benefits of participating in Efficiency Canada is it creates a bit of a halo effect for the industry. It puts a bit of distance between the commercial interests of our members and policy goals that the government might want to pursue. So it creates a more trustworthy and robust discussion with government. So that's something we're pursuing specifically in relation to the promotion or proliferation of heat pumps. So I mentioned already the Canada Green Building Strategy. There's a consultation that is underway. We have notified members about this opportunity. There is a direct portal that NRCan has created to allow any Canadian, any company, any individual to make to share their thoughts and make a direct submission. It's a pretty straightforward portal. We've shared that with members a couple of times. If anyone's thinking they have something to add to this this discussion, first I would suggest you read this document. It's not a particularly onerous document. It's maybe 40 or 50 pages, but it's full of a lot of commentary that will resonate, I think. And then we invite you. Yeah, sorry.
Martin, can I just step in for 1 second? We have a question on the Q&A section. I'm wondering, it's pretty relevant. We have a question from Kurt Fisher. What's being done by the industry to raise consumer and end user awareness of the Greener Homes program? Okay,
that's a fair question. Thank you, Kurt. I'll try to answer it now, but I'm going to say if there are other questions, maybe we could leave them to the end. But I'm okay to tackle that one now. The short answer is we have submitted. Actually, it's in a way it's a very timely question, Kurt, because when I sat in on the industry roundtable with the minister, he asked a question very bluntly, like, name one thing that we should be doing that we're not today to help move the ball forward on this. And my comment was, it's not enough to rely on HVAC contractors to sell this program, to make this program work. They know, and we know, that the success of greener homes really, really depends on contractors. They have to talk about the program, they have to have the products, they have to have the expertise. And as with other programs in the past, they tend to lead the way and generate the majority of business that's done under those programs. They recognize that, and our comment, and we hear this a lot from contractors, is they would appreciate higher level consumer education on the part of government, so that when they show up at a customer's house and want to talk about this program, homeowners are already aware, they're already informed. And I'll say that was basically my comment, a little more detailed and substantive than that. But the minister's response was, we're going to take this as a top priority going forward in the fall. Now that the program, they feel at NRCan, is in pretty good hands, it seems to be firing on all cylinders. It's still not perfect, but they've seemed to have figured out, how to respond in a timely way to the rebate applications and so on. They feel that they're in a position now to start promoting it a little more aggressively. So we'll hold them accountable to that. We'll be pushing them to do some type of broad scale campaign directed at homeowners across the country. I'm going to come back to this because there's some other aspects of that are relevant in this discussion. So this document, I'm not going to go through it because you can all read it for yourself. We've shared it, but if anyone has an interest, we can send you another copy. It's all available online. But it's pointing out the enormity of the task in front of us as Canadians, not just the HVAC sector, but generally. They recognize how much of carbon reductions have to be tackled by way of by addressing the existing building stock, residential and commercial. So you see some statistics there. You can see that emissions have actually gone up. We're not actually gaining ground, we're falling behind. Some statistics that were prepared by the Canada Green Building Council talk about the job opportunities related to this sector. All great stuff, but it means we need to actually find the workers to actually do this work, and that's part of our that's also part of our ask of government. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Probably the simplest statistic to capture the challenge that's in front of us, by their own admission, NRCan said, the minister said, at the current rates of retrofitting homes, to meet the government's targets, it will take 142 years to retrofit all homes in Canada. We're only retrofitting about 1% per annum, and the rate has to be closer to 3 to 5% in order to start making some traction. Similarly, in the commercial sphere, it's a little more optimistic. They say it'll only take 71 years to hit our targets, but obviously that doesn't do anything for Canada meeting its Paris climate targets. So they've recognized that, and they're basically saying to industry, our industry, and to others, tell us what you need to help us accelerate this transition. So that's partly what our submission is going to be about. And I'm just going to put just a bit of a suggestion. For some reason, this isn't coming up on the screen. Can you see anything, or is it blank, Loretta? It's blank, right?
It's blank.
Yeah, it's showing on my screen as it's coming through, but for some reason it's not actually translating. Let me there it is. Just had to click on it. Okay, so I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but basically, if I could frame this up, and I'm going to say we invite members to give us their comments, to share their thoughts, first to read the document, any ideas you have that you think might contribute to this, but this is how we're looking to frame it. And it's important to talk about both sides of the marketplace, the demand side and the supply side. We really can't do one without the other. So Kurt's comment about consumer education is critical. We talk about it's important to provide market stimulus in the form of grants and loans. The federal government has already done that for greener homes. There's probably more they can do, and we've made some suggestions about things they could do in relation to, you know, direct replacement of equipment under no heat situations, you know, that don't qualify for greener homes. Every time that happens, it's a missed opportunity. They recognize that. We need to think of ways we can capture that. So there's different types of grants, loans, and other forms of market stimulus, tax incentives, and that sort of thing that can be done. And the federal government seems to be all over that. But that's not going to be as effective without consumer awareness at a high level. And I guess I didn't finish this point. The high level, the rest of that point should be what some of our members call, you know, they need air cover. Contractors at the kitchen table can talk about these programs and the benefits of low carbon technologies, of heat pumps and so on, but they would appreciate materials, references in a variety of broad scale means to support what they're saying, so that it doesn't sound just like a sales pitch, that it actually resonates and it's kind of validated. So that level of consumer education is needed. We still have lots and lots of Canadians that don't know what a heat pump is. So that work has to be done too. It can't just be done by the industry. And all of that demand side stimulus won't achieve the goals if we don't also address the supply side concerns, one of which is ensuring adequate supply. Probably everyone on this call is aware of the supply chain issues that we've been bumping up against in the last couple of years. This has created a great interest on the part of the federal government and several provinces to find ways to encourage manufacturers of clean technologies to actually relocate into Canada and produce for the Canadian market. That's not something that a lot of our members would want to talk about. Years ago, it was kind of counter to the trends and probably a bit of a long shot that any of that might happen. But it seems that there is demand now, or sorry, interest now. We recently got support from our manufacturers division to engage with government on what sorts of conditions they would need to put in place to encourage manufacturer members in our sector to relocate into Canada to produce for the Canadian market. That's very early, but this is part of the need to ensure an adequate supply of product. But by far the most important supply side issue is ensuring we have the workers to install, service, maintain, and sell heat pumps going into the future. So this is probably the biggest project that we're focused on, is working with governments, working with the industry to move to address that challenge. We don't have enough people to do the work today, and we're going to need differently trained people going forward. So this is a really big challenge, and I won't go into it now. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. We're still pushing hard on this, on that need with government. And as I was saying before, as part of our submission, we're going to say to the government, we have said this already, but we're going to say, you can't just address one of these in isolation to all the others. All these elements are going to be needed to transform the market, and timing and coordination is really important. Also, as I indicated earlier, this isn't something HRAI can do on its own. We can't even do it on our own with governments. We need to involve other allied stakeholders. We need to all be on the same page to help move the needle forward on this. So that's what we plan to talk with government about, in the form of a couple of things. One, our submission on the green building strategy, but we'll also talk about this in relation to our budget submission, which I'll come to in a minute. So quickly, I'm going to talk about what's next, and then we'll change gears and talk about something else. What's next? Our annual meeting. I've mentioned already that there's a lot of conversations going to be happening at our annual meeting on these topics. So if you're coming, great. If you're still thinking about it, I would encourage you to pull the trigger and show up next week, and we'll get into some of these issues much more deeply with the right people. Following on that, we are planning a regional roadshow, taking some of these discussions to different parts of the country. So just stay tuned for that. We'll start doing that in the fall, and I think we're going to focus on Vancouver initially, in British Columbia. We will be making a federal budget submission, as we have done in the past. before the end of September. And some of the elements I talked about in that 4-part strategy will be included in our budget submission. Again, if anyone has any thoughts about specific things to ask for, let me know. We really want to have member input. We think we know what people want, but it's really better to hear directly from members on these things. And I'll say, as I think it was one of our friends at Impact Public Affairs once said, if you really want to let the federal government know what your priorities are as an industry, tell them how they should spend taxpayer dollars. That's the easiest way to show what your priorities are, is to talk about spending. So that's what we do in the form of our budget submission. Then we are waiting. Many of you will know about our workforce development plan that we put in front of Employment and Social Development Canada in April. We were hoping to hear back from them in June. It's now September. And the only thing we know from them is it's still in consideration. They are considering funding our project, which is a $6.8 million effort to tackle some of the workforce challenges that I've mentioned. We're going to continue to engage with the federal minister and NRCan. That's obvious. We'll have lots of conversations going forward in the fall, both under the green building strategy and through other avenues. Okay, so I'm going to stop at that point. I do hope that this has triggered some questions, but we're going to wait to take some of those questions till the end. And right now I want to turn to some of the work that's been happening at the provincial level, and I'm going to invite some of my colleagues to step up and talk about some really positive developments around trades training and administration of the trades in 3 different provinces. So first, I'd like to invite Chelsea Govardhan to join us and talk about what's happening at the provincial level in Ontario. Chelsea?
Hi, everyone. Chelsea Govardhan here. I am the Government Relations and Stakeholder Relations Specialist at HRAI with a focus in Ontario. So like Martin mentioned, I will be giving an update today about developments that have been happening in Ontario. Martin, next slide. Perfect. And you can skip through to highlight all bullet points. Thanks. So the main focus of my update today will surround Skilled Trades Ontario, which many of you will know came into effect at the beginning of 2022. It's the new Crown agency that has replaced the previous system of the Ontario College of Trades, and it has oversight of the trades for the province. The main responsibilities you can see on the screen here is establishing apprenticeship programs, which includes training standards, curriculum standards, and certification exams, as well as the issuing and reissuing of certificates of qualification. And more generally, STO, which is the acronym they're using, or STO, has an oversight of addressing the labor shortages that we're seeing in many trades, including our own, and also simplifying the services that will be offered to tradespeople in a one-window approach, particularly through online formats through their website, where you can renew and reissue your certificate of qualification through their website. Also, they'll be focused on promoting the trades as a choice for young people in addressing labor shortages. So like I mentioned, Skilled Trades Ontario came into effect earlier this year, and from our engagement with Skilled Trades Ontario, we have learned that it's about a 24-month rollout period that they're expecting for the full implementation of this new agency. We're getting into about the 9-month mark. So we've seen that all of their digital resources are now available on their website. They've selected a CEO as well as a board of directors. So they are underway in getting the processes developed and having industry be able to contact and work with the individuals that have been selected to work at Skills Trade Ontario. Next slide, Martin. Sorry, next slide. Perfect. So just getting into our engagement with Skills Trade Ontario, I would like to say that this has been a victory for HRAI and its members, seeing that we've had active engagement with Skills Trade Ontario that actually predates the inception of Skills Trade Ontario from the beginning of this year. We were actively engaged in the regulatory consultations that were member-informed submissions, that we were happy to see some of the suggestions come to fruition in Skilled Trades Ontario in their regulations, which include the use of compliance tools. We've also had engagement with key individuals, including the Director of Policy, John Vanderdolen, who provided a presentation at CMPX and had some engagement with our members during CMPX and his education session. We've also been engaged regularly with the current CEO of Skilled Trades Ontario, Melissa Young, and the Deputy Registrar, Michael Barnett. You'll see on the screen here, there's an image of Melissa Young, who has been, a big advocate for HRAI in her previous experiences, and was aware of HRAI prior to coming into her role as CEO. So again, another victory for HRAI and our membership, because we have established a very influential relationship, and one that I do believe will garner a lot of success in some of moving into some of the issues that we have, gaining success and achieving the goals that we've set out. So here I'll be talking a little bit about a particular issue that has come out of our discussions with Melissa at Skills Trade Ontario, which is the migration of the gas certification from oversight at TSSA to Skilled Trades Ontario. Again, another big victory for HRAI and for industry, as this is an issue that we have been lobbying for a number of years. So to be able to see this come to fruition is a big success for industry. We've had a series of meetings with TSSA, the Minister of Labor's office, the Ministry of Labor as well, and Skills Trade Ontario to help inform and influence the development of gas trade under oversight of Skilled Trades Ontario. You'll see on the screen here that I've listed HRAI as trusted, respected, and engaged. And those are the words coming out of Melissa's mouth and Michael's mouth, that they've given recognition that HRAI, because of our members and our representation of members, is viewed by Skilled Trades Ontario as a trusted and respected organization, and they value the insights that we've been able to share thus far and are looking forward to engaging with our membership in a very meaningful way to be able to shape this trade, as well as influence and move forward some of the other issues that we were able to bring to their attention. Some of the engagement that we look forward to having with Skills Trade Ontario for this particular issue will include member engagement activities such as roundtable discussions, webinars, and written submissions that we will be providing to Skilled Trades Ontario that will help inform, for example, what an apprenticeship will look like for this prospective gas trade. So that that was a lot of information. I see that we have a question in the chat as well, and I'll leave that to the end. But that's my update for Skilled Trades Ontario, and I'll pass it back over to Martin.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, I will echo that the meetings we've had with Melissa Young and Michael Barnett have been very positive, and almost surprising how engaged they were with us and how well aware they were of our priorities and past involvement. So it's a refreshing opening to our conversations with this new organization, and we're really looking forward to making progress on a number of files. I want to now just turn to two other provinces, and I was hoping that I have to find a document here. Pardon me for 1 minute. Okay. Hoping to have Victoria Cross, our BC Government Relations lead, to join us but she's traveling in the US and had a conflict at this time, so she's not able to be on the call with us today. So I'm going to report very quickly on her behalf, just to say that after some, years of work in British Columbia promoting the trades and the need for, specifically for a residential heat pump installer trade, really very much modeled on the 313D licensing in Ontario, we started to get some traction. So we made a budget submission in BC 3 or 4 months ago, and recently there was a budget report that was issued, which is really the government's way of taking all the budget submissions, of which they get many hundreds of submissions, digesting them, and then turning them into specific recommendations for the government. And the report directly quotes HRAI. It says, among other things, it says the report quotes HRAI's call for the province to create necessary conditions for a successful transition to a skilled trade certification regime by establishing a robust and clearly understandable program of compliance and ensuring a clear pathway for the addition of new trades, for example, a residential refrigeration trade, based on market and industry needs. That was a direct submission we made. That's a quote from HRAI, and that's the BC government recognizing that they're just reintroducing compulsory trades in the province. They're also recognizing, excuse me, that there's a need to adapt existing programs or develop new ones to meet evolving market needs. The residential heat pump market in British Columbia is new. It's growing exponentially, and there is not a sufficient supply of qualified people to do the work. So this is a growing need. The report also highlighted HRAI's concerns about that much needed retrofits in the province will outpace current industry capacity, and that there's a need for more well-trained, properly trained workers to succeed in any low carbon transition. So this isn't really, you can't say that this is an outcome. This isn't a new program. It isn't a regulation, but it does indicate that we are being heard. A lot of work still to be done, but as we move forward into the fall, HRAI will continue to advance these issues in BC. And like I said, the good news is that it appears that they're actually hearing our concerns. So that's a quick update on British Columbia. I'm now going to invite John Sutherland from our office in Atlantic Canada to talk about what's happening with in Nova Scotia. John?
Well, good afternoon, everyone from Halifax. Just like to talk very briefly about HRAI's progress in Nova Scotia in working with the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency with respect to the establishment of a residential HVAC technician trade here in the province. I'm going to do a pivot now over to my colleague, Catherine Privet, just to give us that brief update. Catherine?
Thank you, John. So just a quick update on that. The Trade Advisory Committee had 27 applications, which is a record number for applications to that. The board will now select a committee of up to 10 people, and then hopefully these selections are made before the end of September, if not October. Once the committee's approved, they'll start their orientation in November or December and then get to work. So we're hopeful that it won't take too long for the committee to come to a decision. They've seen committees take anywhere from 6 months to up to 2 years, but we're hoping where the HVAC trade already exists in other provinces, that that'll be on the shorter end to make a decision. And then once the committee makes that decision, they'll report that to the board for approval and then hopefully get moving on that.
Very good, Catherine, and thank you for that. And I'd just like to point out that the effort and support from HRAI and in our national office has been really critical in moving this file forward here in Nova Scotia. So Martin, may I turn it back over to you?
Yes, thank you, John and Catherine. The good news about the traction we're gaining in Nova Scotia, it was an important first step. The trade we're referring to, again, maybe it's a maritime or Atlantic version of the 313D license for those who are aware of that certification in Ontario, also one in Manitoba. We obviously would like to see it not just in Nova Scotia, but in the other 3 Atlantic provinces. And having it approved in Nova Scotia will be a very important step to seeing similar recognition in the other provinces. They do have a common process for gaining trade approval. So this fall, we'll be building on the success in Nova Scotia to see similar regulatory recognition of that residential trade in the other 3 provinces. All very much aligned with the work we're doing in BC, though it's a quite different political context in BC. These things all kind of go hand in hand. If we have success in getting those provinces on board, we create the potential to make that residential trade a red seal certification that'll allow for interprovincial mobility of technicians. So all very positive, but as you can tell, the wheels turn very slowly on that regulatory process in Nova Scotia. So hopefully we'll see something that the industry can build on within the next year. Okay, I think that's the end of our presentations, but I do see a number of questions, and I'm going to turn to one that I'd like to answer live, and that's a question from Kurt. It really does feed into some work we're doing. His question is, the technology in heat pumps has evolved into complex electronic control systems. What is HRAI doing with OEMs to engage the contractors and upgrade their knowledge base, specifically the 313D certificate holder that may not have the knowledge base that a 313A has? This is a big question. It's not just up to HRAI to engage with manufacturers and contractors, because these are regulated trades. So we have to involve training providers and obviously the ministry and now Skilled Trades Ontario in Ontario that oversee those trades. You can't really make changes without proper approvals. That's why what we were talking about before, what Chelsea was referencing, is so important to have that positive relationship with Skilled Trades Ontario. We want them to invite and welcome and engage with HRAI on these kinds of questions. But to answer more precisely, Kurt, one of the things we're actually pursuing right now, we're hoping to gain some funding. We're developing a proposal to NRCan for funding that will do an assessment of the existing trades around heat pumps in Ontario, including the 313A and D, in terms of how well they fit the needs of the industry and the marketplace in terms of proper qualified heat pump installation. And we're tracking at the same time the gap between the existing 313D license and the certificate, the knowledge and skills held by a licensed gas technician. We know that there aren't nearly enough 313D ticket holders in the province to address the work that's coming. So the base of personnel, of technicians that will probably be turning to do that work are today gas technicians. So one of the big questions is, what does it take for a gas technician with all their skills and training in the field? What would it take for them to become a successful 313D ticket holder? And your question actually takes it further. Is the 313D ticket in its current state sufficient to meet the needs of the industry? We're going to do a gap analysis, a skills gap analysis, hopefully with funding support from NRCan to answer some of those questions, which will then give us a platform to guide industry on what types of training will be needed. Well, obviously, like I said, have to engage Skilled Trades Ontario and all the various training providers in the province to do all this together. This is not just strictly an HRAI exercise. I'll also say, and I think I can say this with support from Sandy, that even if we don't get funding from NRCan for this particular initiative, it's so important that we probably are going to have to do it anyway. We'll do it on with HRAI support. Maybe we'll turn to some members to help us with that process, but this is about collecting the data and doing the analysis necessary to know how big that gap is and what sorts of training are going to be needed to fill the gap. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, Kurt. Happy to have a conversation with you offline to talk about any of that further. I do see another question from Kurt that talks about fast tracking equivalent certification for new Canadian immigrants, both for gas technicians and for refrigeration or HVACR technicians. HRAI, I'm going to say, doesn't have a strategy for that, but that is definitely a point of discussion with the federal government to talk about, one of the tools that should be explored to help address the skills gap, the shortage of qualified workers is to do something more focused on bringing in qualified tradespeople and helping them to get appropriately qualified or recognized in Canada to work the trade that they're skilled in. Okay. I'm going to leave it at that then. I don't know that there's any more questions. We are very close to our time, so I'll just maybe keep the floor open for a couple of minutes. Loretta, I don't know if you're hearing any more questions. I'm just looking at the chat, sorry, the Q&A. Nothing in the chat. No, there's not. Okay, one last opportunity for anyone to raise questions. Nancy had a question, I think that was already answered by Sandy, if I'm not mistaken. Sandy, did you want to address that? Do we want to talk about that one? Not sure if others would appreciate hearing the answer.
Sure. Yeah, the question was about HRAI reestablishing an ambassador program to get members out into the community, specifically schools, to speak about the value of the trade and the sector. So we put a relatively large request into the federal government in the ESDC funding request to do this on steroids. And I would kind of make the same comment that Martin made earlier. If we don't get this ESDC funding, which we probably will close off on that file in the next month or so, whether we'll get it or not, there are some things that we will do anyway, just maybe not at the same scale. So we'll be trying to figure out what's affordable. The ESDC funding allows us to do these things on steroids. So the issue of kind of waiting for the funding is slowed some things down, but it doesn't halt the process by any means. Thanks, Martin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I thought I had muted myself again. Okay, then I'm gonna call it a day and say thank you all for joining us today. With a bit of a whirlwind, I would invite you all to, as I said earlier, if you have thoughts about our budget submission, let us know. If you have thoughts about our conversation on the green buildings strategy, let us know. And if you haven't yet and are still maybe interested in registering for our annual meeting, I think the doors are still open for that too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Loretta. So thank you all for attending and wish you all a great day. See you soon.